Streak Master. Music by Mr. Chalky. Talking fantasy football wide receivers. Okay, to get things started, 1-2 by mostly everyone is Calvin Johnson and Demaryius Thomas. I think those are a pretty safe bet, and there's not much to say about them. They're the top wide receivers, they're in top passing offenses, and I think the only question really is when you should take these guys. I think if you consider Calvin Johnson in the first round, then you got to consider Demaryius Thomas also in the first round. Myself, I put them in the same tier this year. Last year I had Calvin in a tier by himself. This year Demaryius Thomas moves into that first tier. Those guys are together. So if you're thinking about taking one of them in the first round, you should probably be thinking about taking both of them. In my rankings, I have them near the second tier of running backs. So that's going to put them in the later ends of the first round. Of course, there's differences with PPR and everything. I was talking straight up, regular scoring, no PPR. I still would take these guys. Okay, now we're comparing them with guys like Lacy, Lynch, Murray, Foster, Bell, Ball, Martin. Those guys are in my tier 2. That's who we're comparing Calvin Johnson to Demaryius Thomas with. All of those guys in tier 2 have iffy things about them, whether it's injury, contract issues. A lot of them do have injury issues. In my rankings, I'm putting my tier 1 wide receivers above the tier 2 running backs. So that means Calvin Johnson, Demaryius, those guys are I'm going to be looking at them towards the end of the first round, maybe even 8th, 9th pick range. And there's really nothing to complain about right there when you get those guys. You know they're going to produce, and that's all you need to know. And if you are in those late rounds, the question is, what are you going to do in the comeback? Are you going to look at the tier 2 wide receivers when it comes back around, or are you going to be looking at the tier 2 running backs? I know I'm talking a little off topic here about running backs, but I would actually go running back there. While having a guy like Calvin and, Brandon Marshall on your team, while having a guy like Calvin and Brandon Marshall on your team, while that does seem like a long shot, it is a very real possibility. But then if you do that, you got to wait a lot of picks until you're looking at your first running back, and then you're going to be stuck with guys like maybe Alfred Morris, maybe Ryan Matthews, CJ Spiller. Those are going to be your number 1 running backs, and then you're going to be looking at, for your number 2 running back, possibly Rashad Jennings, Gerhart, Sankey, in that range, and you don't want that. So while having those wide receivers is great, I think guys later on are going to be good enough to where, you could still get maybe a guy like Randall Cobb in the 3rd round. If you do have that late first round pick, you could still get a guy like Andre Johnson, Pierre Garçon in the late 3rd round, which isn't terrible. I definitely would take a better running back as well with Pierre Garçon type. So you got Calvin Johnson and, let's say, Le'Veon Bell and Andre Johnson. That's not bad. I would probably rather have that than Calvin Johnson, Brandon Marshall, and Alfred Morris. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Alfred Morris, so I kind of made that in my favor. But what I want on my team is at least one running back that I know is going to be solid. He has the chance to be a top 5 guy. When you wait too long, you're not going to get that chance. A little off topic, but next to your wide receivers, these guys are very close to the top guys. Not that far at all. AJ Green, Des Bryant, Brandon Marshall, slightly Julio Jones. I wasn't going to put Julio there, but he was better than the rest of the tier 3 guys, and I didn't want to put a tier of Julio Jones by himself. So these guys all very similar. Wouldn't hate to have any of them on my team. Des Bryant, he's going to be in for a solid year. He's already said that he's probably in the best condition of his life, and you got to look at that. Of course, Tony Romo and his back problems that may come up, but I wouldn't put that hurting any of his draft stock there. But all these guys, I mean, Julio Jones is coming off an injury, but okay, that's why he's at the bottom of the tier 2. But again, I think I like all these guys. They're going to be going in the second round. AJ Green and Dez Bryant, it's very close between those two. I would probably slightly take Dez Bryant. He has bigger upside. We've already seen what AJ Green can do. I think he's kind of topped off, and that's okay. That's okay, AJ Green's topped off, but we know what he's going to do. Dalton's going to throw him the ball a ton, and that's okay. Brandon Marshall, he's still going to get the ball, even though Alshon Jeffrey's there. We know this. We're okay with it. And now after the top 6, it gets kind of, things are starting to mix up a little more. A lot of people have Keenan Allen really high, and I don't know about that. I'm not sure I agree. Fantasy Pros, their rankings has Keenan Allen, their consensus rankings has Keenan Allen at number 11, which I think is too high. I have him around 15 or even higher than that. He's definitely a good receiver. I'm going to give him that. There's no question about it. He did nothing through the first 3 games last year and came on and was a real great wide receiver for the Chargers. But he's not a game breaker type of guy. He's not someone that's going to be like a Brandon Marshall. I still don't think he's with the Antonio Browns, even the Alshon Jeffries, Jordy Nelsons. I don't think he is. We saw last year his main thing towards the end of the year was his touchdown rate. He had 5 touchdowns in weeks 14 through 16. That's the prime area for fantasy playoffs, and that's why a lot of people like him so much, and I think that's why he's getting overrated. While he does, earlier in the year, he did have 100-yard games. He had 5 overall, but the Chargers kind of went away a little bit from the passing towards the end of the year, and it worked for him, and I think they're gonna scale back on the passing that Phillip Rivers was doing earlier in the year last year, where he was passing a ton. They're going to scale back a little bit. They picked up Donald Brown. They're going to be running the ball a little bit more, and we saw that. While Allen did have those 5 touchdowns, he only had 8 receptions in those same games. So how much can you count on touchdowns for a guy? I don't think that Keenan Allen is close to a top 10 option. Fantasy Pros has him at 11. I think he's higher than that. He's going to be 15, 16, 17. I have him in my tier 4 at the bottom of my tier 4. So actually, I'm possibly going to move him into my tier 5. I'm still undecided, but they're very close right now. I just think there's no reason to put Keenan Allen in the same category as guys like Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Jeffrey, Vincent Jackson, Antonio Brown. I don't think there's a reason to do that. And I don't think he can live up to those numbers either. So he won me multiple leagues last year, but he probably isn't going to win me any leagues this year, because people are probably going to grab him before me. Getting into the tier 3 talk, I mentioned the guys. All of them have great upside. All of them, we know what they can do. Probably maybe the biggest question is Vincent Jackson. He's always been one of my bigger questions, but he has throughout the years continued to impress, now with the Buccaneers. You can't ignore his numbers, and now he's going to get Josh McCown. Honestly, I don't think it matters who's throwing him the ball, but McCown does have experience throwing to Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. Maybe that helps Vincent Jackson, maybe it doesn't, but he's been extremely consistent. While he stayed off the radar of, a top 5 guy, he's been floating around the top 10 area, and I find no reason to take Keenan Allen over Vincent Jackson, which is what the consensus has at Fantasy Pros. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you want to do that, go ahead, but I'm taking Vincent Jackson all day over Keenan Allen. Jackson gets a better quarterback this year, and look at his previous numbers. In Tampa Bay, in 2 seasons, he's hit 1,200 yards both seasons and has had a total of 15 touchdowns in those 2 years. Why are those numbers going to regress? I don't think they are. He's getting older, has hamstring issues, but I'm not going to worry about that. The other guys, Antonio Brown, he's going to get a lot of targets. Pittsburgh, Roethlisberger, we know, okay. Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, top 2 options for the Packers. If they can stay healthy, easily should be in the top 10 with Aaron Rodgers. I'm putting both of them in the same tier because we saw what Cobb did last year before his injury. He's going to be a real solid option. Jordy Nelson, he has a great catch rate with Aaron Rodgers. There's no reason why he should be taken any lower than that. Next tier, this is tier 4. Andre Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Victor Cruz, Wes Welker, Pierre Garcon. I did have Garcon in tier 5, but I decided to move him back in 4. I think one area that differs from everyone else, I have Wes Welker a little bit higher. I have Pierre Garcon a little bit lower. And I think the other guys are fairly in the same range. Andre Johnson, this is a guy, we know what he can do, but he's always battling injuries, and he had his issues with figuring out if he wants to play for Houston and all that nonsense, but it looks like he's going to be playing for the Texans this year. Larry Fitzgerald, he is on the downside, but still Larry Fitzgerald. I'm not going to worry about that too much. Solid tier 4 option. Victor Cruz, I think he's a guy that can definitely have an improved season. I think the Giants' offense is going to be better. I think Eli Manning's going to be better. They're going to bounce back from last year, and I think Cruz is going to be one of those guys to bounce back. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I have him around the 15 range. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back into the top 10 of wide receivers. Wes Welker, another guy, we know what he can do. As long as he stays healthy, gets away from those concussions, he's going to be a good option. But I am very iffy about the concussions because they have become a problem. He missed 3 games last year, so he's probably going to be the last one in this tier 4 that I have. If you take him as your wide receiver 2, that could be tough. It could be very tough. Best case scenario, you have Wes Welker as your wide receiver 3. I am questioning his ability to stay healthy all year. That's definitely going to be something to look at. And Pierre Garcon, another guy I was iffy about. A lot of people have him really high. I don't know if he can be able to do that again. He got a lot of touchdowns last year. He is number 13 on Fantasy Pros. I'm not sure. I think a lot of people are thinking RG3 can put up the numbers Peyton Manning did, because the Redskins are stacked right now. They got Garcon, but they pick up Andre Roberts. They pick up Deshaun Jackson. They still have Jordan Reed at tight end. So you got all these options. I don't think Garcon's going to match his touchdown total from last year, so that already hurts. It's going to be real tough for him to match his yardage total as well. But again, having to defend guys like Deshaun Jackson, if that works out, that signing works out, these guys are going to get a lot of open space. So, I mean, there is an upside factor to it. That's why he's number 13 at Fantasy Pros. But how many times is Washington going to throw the ball? I mean, this is RG3. He can throw it a mile. But he has had accuracy issues. And he'll continue to have accuracy issues this year. I don't think there's any reason why his accuracy will get that much better in the offseason. But, I mean, it still is a team that has solid running backs. And I'm not going to put Garcon in a tier 3 area. I'll take him above Wes Welker just because of Wes's injury issues. But Garcon is another questionable play. But I think in the end, I think he'll be pretty solid. And my next tier, I have things a little bit different than Fantasy Pros. For some reason, I mean, a couple things I just don't completely agree with, but Michael Crabtree is at 19. I don't see a reason for that. Again, Kaepernick's not going to turn into Peyton Manning here. The 49ers did pick up Stevie Johnson. They do have Anquan Boldin. They do have Vernon Davis. Crabtree at number 19, that seems excessive. Really excessive. And yeah, that's too high for me. Michael Floyd, that's too high for me as well at number 20. Cordarrelle Patterson, that's also too high. Everyone loves him as a sleeper, but I think too many people love him as a sleeper. Number 21, that's too high. So my guy's Keenan Allen. I dropped him down a bit. T.Y. Hilton, I put him up a tier above what everyone else has. Roddy White, I also dropped him a little bit lower. Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin. I already talked about Keenan Allen. T.Y. Hilton, I mean, it's in the kind of the same situation as these other guys. Of course, he's battling a guy like Reggie Wayne and Hakeem Nicks for targets, and their 2 tight ends, Dwayne Allen, Coby Fleener. While he's battling targets, he's going to get a lot more open looks than he did last year. Well, maybe not a lot more, but last year when all those guys were injured for the Colts, Hilton was getting double teamed, yet he was still putting up big numbers. He's the Colts' big play threat. He's going to find open seams down the middle. He's going to find open looks down the field for the Colts. He's going to get a lot of big touchdowns, and I think a lot of people are underrating him. Roddy White, while he does say he's healthy, he's still, one of those older guys that battles injuries seeming every year. You can count on him, but don't count on him like what he has done in the past. Sean Jackson, I already talked about him. Jeremy Maclin, injury problems, obviously coming off the ACL issue. He is a guy I like, though. I put him in my tier 5. A lot of people have him a bit lower than that, and I think he's a guy with upside. Back and down in tier 5, it's usually going to be your wide receiver 3. I'm fine with an upside guy at wide receiver 3. That's where Jeremy Maclin comes in. Nick Foles is going to have to throw to someone. Maclin, if he stays healthy, could be in line for a really awesome year, and I like him in that tier 5. Alright, tier 6. Percy Harvin, Torrey Smith, Crabtree, Michael Floyd, Julian Edelman, Marcus Colston, Patterson, and I think I'm going to throw Kendall Wright in there. All these guys have good things about them, but then there's this one thing that's turning them back from being higher on my list. All of these guys have something about them. Percy Harvin didn't really play last year. He joins a team that likes to run. He could be in for a really awesome year, but he's another guy that has injury issues. Torrey Smith, I think he's going to have a better year this year, and is one of my another upside target here. Joe Flacco is getting some of his guys back, which is going to be a lot different for Torrey Smith. That's going to open things up for him again. Steve Smith comes into the picture. Dennis Pitta returns healthy. That's going to open things up for Torrey Smith. I like him over some of these guys, which is kind of surprising, but I would take Torrey Smith over Michael Crabtree. Michael Floyd, talked about him a little bit, solid option for the Cardinals. Eventually, he will take over for Larry Fitzgerald. I don't think this is the year. People are calling it for it this year, but I don't think it yet. Marquez Colson, another guy, 31. He says he's healthy. We'll wait and see. But a lot of people underrating him as well, which is something you probably shouldn't do in the Saints offense. Julian Edelman, I like him a lot. Tom Brady knows what Edelman can do. Those two have worked together. While guys like Aaron Dobson will increase their role, I think Edelman, he still has a known spot on this team. Patterson, he's going to be used a lot for the Vikings, but again, it's the Vikings. Temper expectations. Kendall Wright, his status is kind of based off of quarterback Jake Locker, who's always hurt, so I'm probably going to take him off this tier 6. I'd probably, looking at the list, I'd probably take Mike Wallace above Kendall Wright, actually. I think Mike Wallace is going to have better numbers than he did last year. And in my sleeper range, like Terrence Williams, Emmanuel Sanders, Brandon Cooks, Aaron Dobson, Tavon Austin, Jared Boykin, Brian Hartline, Brandon LaFell, and Harry Douglas. Those are all my sleepers, and I would talk about them all, but my throat's getting kind of dry here, and I figured I'd let you guys go. If you want to ask about sleepers, catch us on Twitter at BullishSports1. Ask questions. Actually, the other day I asked an interesting question that got a lot of answers. I'd pick one between Reggie Wayne, Eric Decker, Golden Tate, and Dwayne Bowe, and there's probably about 10 responses, and they all said there's no consensus. No one picked one person over the other ever. All these guys were picked. Maybe Reggie Wayne was picked 3 times, Golden Tate a couple times, Decker, and then Bowe maybe once. But that's something you really got to look at when you're going into drafts, because you're going to get in these situations. You're going to get in these later situations, picking up your 4th wide receiver, your 5th wide receiver, and you're going to run into these guys, and you're going to, who are these guys? What ones do you want? And these are questions you're going to be asking yourself. So if you have questions like that, feel free to ask us on Twitter. We will respond. But for that answer, I would say Eric Decker just based on targets alone, but that's hard to go with the Jets wide receiver. I think Reggie Wayne's chemistry already with Andrew Luck puts him ahead of that group, even though he's coming off that injury. I just like Reggie Wayne above them. His chemistry with Andrew Luck is hard to beat. And then Golden Tate coming into a new offense. Dwayne Bowe, he's fallen down a little bit as well. Actually, not a little bit, a lot. So I go with Reggie Wayne out of those 4. But again, thanks for listening. This is the Shriek Master. Fantasy football, wide receivers. Again, stay tuned, BullishSports.com. We're going to be talking fantasy football. We got a lot of good stuff here. So if you have a draft coming up, let us know. We will help you out. Thanks for listening. Deuce.